So 1 year ago, the Sony a6700 was released, and the question is it still worth buying today? Now, this camera costs around $1,400 new, depending on where you are in the world, and for that amount of money, you're getting a hybrid style APS-C camera, which means that it's designed for photography and for video. The video specs are basically the same as the Sony FX30, which is very impressive for a camera of this price point. But it obviously doesn't have the same body as the FX30, meaning that it's more likely to overheat at higher frame rates when you're recording for long periods of time. But it's also designed heavily for photography. It's got a viewfinder, it's got a mechanical shutter, it's got a decent screen. It has everything that you expect to find on a hybrid style body. Now, the photos that come out of this camera are very pleasing. I think it does a really good job of capturing a nice image for photography and for videography. But it's not without its cons. So we're going to do this kind of backwards. I'm going to talk about the cons of this camera first before we get to reasons why you might want to consider this camera. First off, it has one SD card slot. So if you are a professional and you're recording or shooting weddings or anything important where you really need redundant recording, this probably isn't for you. It's just got the one SD card slot. It's one way that they were able to make it cheaper, but obviously that is a downside to be aware of. Video shooters, you only have a micro HDMI port there on the side, which most of the time is fine. This is a very small, easy camera, and I don't think a lot of people are rigging this up. Some people are, but I don't think very many people are. I think if you're looking for much heavier quality video footage, or you're looking to build this into a rig with external monitors, you're probably going for the FX30 anyway. So yes, it would be nice if it had a full-size HDMI port, so I figured I'd add that in there. Now, the only other con that I can think of is the overheating problem with this camera, but the problem with that is I've never experienced the overheating personally. Now, that doesn't mean that the overheating doesn't exist. There is an overheating problem with this camera. I just haven't experienced it because I'm not pushing the camera in that way. I have no reason to be recording 4K 120 for 30 minutes, right? That's just not a use case for this camera that I have. Now, I did use this as a B cam on a wedding, and it got very hot to the touch, but we never pushed it or risked it for, recording the entire ceremony or something like that. I just didn't want to risk losing that footage. At that point, we just used our other cameras. Not to say it can't get a good image. It is a fantastic camera for B-roll. So if you have a FX30 and you're looking for a small little camera that could capture short, quick little clips, this is probably a great option if you aren't able to get another FX30. I'd probably recommend, if you're video first or video only, get the FX30. It's a better camera for video, but if you're a hybrid shooter, you're just getting started, you're a hobbyist, and you're not doing anything too crazy, the a6700 is a fantastic camera. Now, these videos are really strange, right? I always kind of chuckle whenever I see videos with this title and this thumbnail. I know I went for it as well, but it works. But to ask the question, is it still worth it 1 year later, I think is a very interesting statement for our current viewpoint on cameras. And now, the reason I say that is because a camera doesn't have to be new to still be worth it. It doesn't have to be released within the last 2 months for it still to be a good camera. I think we all have a problem in the photography and videography world called GAS, gear acquisition syndrome, where we have an obsession with buying the best new stuff. I've fallen guilty of that, and I'm sure you probably have as well. So just because a camera is a year old does not mean that it needs replaced, unless you find a different camera that is able to fulfill your needs better than this one. But chances are, most of the time, a camera like this is going to do anything that you need. If the shortcomings that I've talked about aren't a problem for you, if you're not doing anything crazy for very, high-paying clients where you don't really need the second SD card, maybe you're doing YouTube or you're just doing family stuff or church stuff, whatever, this is going to be a fantastic camera for you. And that doesn't stop just because of the passage of time. Still, the image that this captured a year ago is exactly the same as the image that it captures today. Cameras don't deteriorate that quickly. For example, this camera is about 12 years old. This is the Canon C100, and I'd still say that this is definitely worth it today whenever you're buying it used, because you can't buy it new. They don't make it anymore. And when it was new, it was like $8,000. Now you can get them for like $1,000 or less, and it's an incredible camera. The image quality of a camera doesn't change over time. And the crazy thing today is that basically all cameras are good. Everybody's saying this. You have everybody from small channels like myself right the way up. I think even Peter McKinnon said this recently. All cameras are good. You can get a great shot from any camera that you have, and the most important thing is not the camera itself, but the person behind the camera. A good photographer is going to take a much better photo with a cheap camera than a bad photographer will with a really expensive camera. So you gotta hone your craft. Buying a more expensive camera is not gonna make you a better photographer. Being a better photographer is gonna make your camera more worthwhile. And I'm not saying that to put you down, right? If you're a beginner, I'm just trying to advise you, you don't need to spend $4,000 to get a good photo. If you cannot get a good photo with the Sony a6700, a $1,500 camera that came out last year, you're not going to be able to get a good photo with the $4,000 camera that came out this year. Not to say those cameras are bad, but it's probably just not worth wasting your money if photography isn't actually for you. This is a good camera for beginners. Granted, the price point is pretty high for a lot of beginners, but this does a really good job. Now, why the a6700? Well, there's a couple of things about this camera that other cameras don't have that are in the same price point. For example, I think a lot of people look at $1,500-ish for a camera body. They're going to go look at something like the Lumix S5 Mark II, which you can get used for the same price. No, that is a better camera. It is going to be a better camera than this. It can capture a better image, and it does more. It's got a full frame sensor, all that kind of stuff. But along with that, the full frame sensor is going to require full frame glass, and those are more expensive. Not only that, but the Sony ecosystem, right? The Sony E-mount, this lens mount here that houses this sensor, has so many lens options ranging from a variety of prices. Yes, you can spend $2,000 on a lens, but you don't have to. You can buy really affordable vintage lenses and adapt them onto here for pennies. You can put third-party lenses on here that are only a couple $100. You can buy brand new lenses for $500, $600, $700. Whatever you want to do, you can kind of do with this lens mount. And for me, that's one of the main reasons that I stick with Sony, is because of all of their lens options. Again, this isn't to say that something like a Lumix or a Blackmagic or a Canon are bad, because they're all great cameras. They all capture a great image. I like Sony for their ecosystem, and it's what I'm used to. So if you've shot Canon your whole life and you're like, I'm just going to switch to Sony, don't necessarily. You don't have to. If you're used to Canon and you're good with Canon, stick with Canon. It's just easier and better to stick with what you know, because you're going to be more efficient with the gear that you have. You don't always need to upgrade your camera immediately. If you have an a6700 and you think that you have to get the next best camera to be a better photographer, you don't have to. It's still a fantastic camera. It's only 1 year old. Again, there are 10-year-old cameras that are just as good as this. So is the a6700 still worth it in 2024? Yes, if it's the right camera for you. If you're a videographer first and you don't do any photos, don't go with this. Get the FX30. It's a couple $100 more. Way worth it, especially if you buy it used. You can get it for the same price as this brand new. If you're a photographer first and you're capturing really important high-flying client work, this probably isn't for you either. You may as well be investing in a more expensive, proper setup. But if you're a hybrid shooter, you're doing YouTube or Instagram, and you're needing a little bit of both photos and videos, this is a great camera to go for. It opens up a world of fantastic lenses, captures an incredible image, and does a really good job. I hope this video has been helpful too. If it has, do hit the like button, drop a comment down below, or maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I appreciate all of you for doing so, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.